Tomorrow marks the first day of a consequential Supreme Court term where justices will have to make final verdicts on Donald Trump's efforts to consolidate power in the executive branch. On the docket early next month, the court hears arguments over Trump's sweeping worldwide tariffs and whether he can usurp Congress's power to set tariff levels. In December, the court will consider if it can overturn a decades-old ruling protecting the heads of independent agencies after Trump fired the sole remaining Democrat on the Federal Trade Commission. And in January, it will take on Trump's efforts to fire Lisa Cook from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors in a showdown over the independence of the central bank. Join me now, Brendan Ballou, former federal prosecutor and former lawyer with DOJ National Security Division. Welcome back to the show, Brendan. So look, those are just a few of Trump's controversial policies that this court will hear in the upcoming term. Big picture, what's at stake this term?
Really the future of, I hate to say it, how we govern ourselves. You know, you've hit on a couple of the important cases here, but really there are fundamental questions about what the power of the president is going to be, what the powers of states are going to be to discriminate or to prevent discrimination, to allow racial gerrymanders or to prevent them. Questions about what it even means to be a citizen in the United States. You know, quite likely the Supreme Court is going to have to decide whether this president can end birthright citizenship entirely. So, you know, America might be a very different place at the end of the Supreme Court term than it was at the beginning.
So the Trump administration has filed 28 emergency appeals in the last 8 months. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. It describes the pattern like this. The White House takes aggressive action and gets sued right away. Lower courts put a Trump initiative on hold for now. And the administration then quickly asks the Supreme Court to lift the hold. And in most of these appeals, Brendan, the Trump administration has prevailed. So how has this changed the way the court operates?
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think just to play out the dynamic that you're talking about, at the district court level, the Trump administration has lost something like 90% of the time in challenges to agency actions. And then these emergency appeals go up to the Supreme Court, and they're winning about 70% of the time. So it's an enormous reversal. At a practical matter, what it means is that this Supreme Court has really become an enabler of what the Trump administration is trying to accomplish. And I think there's an open question about whether they're reluctant enablers, essentially just worried that they're going to be ignored if they rule against the president, or whether they're enthusiastic ones. You know, you look at the biographies of many of these conservative justices, and through their entire histories, they've been trying to expand presidential power, trying to limit the Voting Rights Act and other laws prohibiting discrimination. And so I think it's important for viewers to understand that this court is revealing itself not necessarily to be a reluctant ally of the president, but rather an enthusiastic one. So what you're suggesting, the administration's success in these emergency appeals, does it necessarily signal, though, how the court will decide some of these upcoming cases, particularly the ones that challenge Trump's executive overreach? I mean, your answer would indicate you think they're going to give a lot of this to him. Absolutely. You know, I think on almost all of these questions, it's pretty clear where the Supreme Court is ultimately going to land. The areas where I think there's an open question are two areas. One, where presidential power conflicts with corporate power. So the cases about the president's authority, for instance, to unilaterally set tariffs or to unilaterally fire members of the Federal Reserve Board, I think that there might be some pushback there. And on the handful of cases where there is enormous public opinion against the president on this, I think the Supreme Court might have a little bit of reluctance. And here I'm thinking in particular about potentially ending birthright citizenship. I think that the Supreme Court might be wary of going so far against public opinion. So while the majority of Americans believe in the authority of the court, a Marquette Law School poll from this week finds the country nearly split on whether the court is going out of its way to avoid making a ruling President Trump could disobey. How carefully does the court need to be in writing these decisions to make sure they can't be ignored? Yeah, it's a great question. And part of the challenge that the Supreme Court has is its power comes from its legitimacy, the belief that it's a fair body and that it's giving reasoned opinions. And in recent years, it's really undermined both of those things, that it's ruled so consistently against the Biden administration and so consistently for the Trump administration, really reveals a partisan bent that I think hurts the court's legitimacy, that so many of its decisions have been made on the shadow docket without literally any explanation, really hurts the idea that it's giving reasoned explanations. And so because of that, I think it's going to make it harder for this court to stand up to the administration when it wants to.
Sobering, all of this, Brendan Ballou. Thank you very much, though. Appreciate you.
Wow. So to call the Supreme Court an enthusiastic ally of Trump is crazy. It's a devastating charge coming from someone who has worked inside the DOJ, so he actually knows what he's talking about. And he's not saying the court is being tricked or is naively giving Trump the benefit of the doubt. He's saying that they are a willing, eager partner in his project. Let's break down the evidence we just heard. First, the numbers. This is the smoking gun. He pointed out that the Trump administration was losing something like 90% of its challenges in the district courts. 90%. That means judges across the country appointed by both parties were ruling the government's actions illegal. But then it gets to the Supreme Court on emergency appeal, and that number flips to a 70% win rate. How is that possible unless the highest court is applying a completely different partisan standard? That's a flashing red siren for the rule of law. Second, the motive. This is an ideological project. As he pointed out correctly, that you can look at the biographies of these conservative justices. For their entire careers, they've been part of a movement to expand executive power and limit civil rights. This isn't a new development for them. It's the culmination of their life's work. They aren't bending to Trump's will. Trump's will just happens to align perfectly with their long-held ideological goals. He is the vehicle for the revolution they have always wanted. And then finally, the future of the democracy. He mentioned that the court will likely decide if a president can unilaterally end birthright citizenship. Let that sink in. A core tenet of American identity since the 14th Amendment could be wiped away. They'll rule on whether a president can usurp Congress's power to set tariffs or fire heads of independent agencies, effectively dismantling the checks and balances that US citizens rely on. This isn't just about Trump, it's about creating an imperial presidency for the future. And the Supreme Court, the supposed defender of the US Constitution, has just been exposed as the primary enabler for all of this unconstitutional behaviour. So what do you think? What was the most chilling part of the prosecutor's breakdown? Was it the statistics or the idea of the court as an enthusiastic ally in dismantling US democracy? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons for more, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching.